Hi folks, the Filipino P here, and it's time for another episode of Candlelight Culture. My power's actually working today, but it's getting dark outside, so I thought it might be more fun to do it like this. Now, if you're interested in learning some of the more unusual things about Filipino culture, this video is for you because I'm gonna explain a few of our customs that might seem a little strange. And if you know anything about the Philippines, we're all about the weird and wacky. And I almost included this first one in one of my mailbag videos because the guy was so confused and offended by it. He was really proud of the birthday present he got for his girlfriend, but when he gave it to her, she just said thanks and laid it on the table and went about her business. He didn't say anything about it, but he was kind of pissed when he left. He thought she was kind of rude, even when she called later on to tell him how much she liked it. If this happens to you, please understand we're not trying to disrespect you. It's just our custom not to open a gift in front of the person that gave it to us. Now, I don't know if it's an Asian thing or just a Filipino thing, but that's the way we do it. We actually make quite a big deal out of birthdays, and here's another thing you're likely to experience if you eat at a restaurant when it's someone's special day. And I know you guys have places where the people come out and sing happy birthday, but not quite like this. Yep, you're liable to see a long line of people surround the table and sing and dance at the top of their lungs while the music is turned up so loud that you can't think straight. So, if you want to avoid being the center of attention, it's best to never disclose your birthday to a Filipina. And there's even another reason why you might want to keep the date a secret, especially if you're inviting people to celebrate with you at a restaurant, because as the birthday boy, you'll be expected to pick up the check for everyone. And as a foreigner, you're probably used to doing that anyway, but it's still my duty to warn you about this stuff. And speaking of eating habits, here's one that might gross you out a little. If you happen to get invited to a Filipino's house for dinner, especially out in the provinces, you might discover that they eat family style, which in our case means bowls of food that each person helps themselves to, sometimes with our fingers. Now, that might not bother you, but this will. Even when someone's got a cold or a cough, it doesn't change a thing. The sick person will still dip their fingers into the bowl of sticky rice and pass it to you with a smile on their face and expect you to eat after them. Talk about a sticky situation. It's like we don't believe in germs or anything we can't see, and I'm afraid I can't think of a graceful way out of this situation, except to develop a sudden stomachache or an emergency phone call that conveniently lasts until the last person finishes eating. But even if you survive dinner, you're still not out of the woods. Don't be surprised if everyone sits around in a circle and starts passing a single glass of alcohol around from one mouth to the next. We call it tagay. And it's a good time to remind everyone that you don't drink. Either that, or you better hope that the alcohol content is high enough to kill anything growing in that glass. Bottoms up! And speaking of bottoms, you probably know about the way we Filipinos use the restroom, the tabo system. We're not big consumers of toilet paper, and we prefer to use water and soap to clean ourselves. Well, let's hope there's soap. If you go into a bathroom with no soap, you definitely want to pass on that bowl of sticky rice. But the reason I mention this is because a lot of you folks ask me how we dry our bottoms afterwards. And the truth is, we don't. We just get dressed and let the water evaporate. See all the useful information you're picking up today? So let's talk about Filipinos themselves. Now, you probably noticed that our names can be all over the place, from things as common as Michelle to something as strange as Queen Elizabeth or King Leicester or Lovely Anne. And you guys think P is weird? You'll notice that we have a lot of old names like Mildred and Hazel, names you guys don't use much anymore. But thankfully, I've never met a Filipina that got saddled with the name Gertrude. Not yet, anyway. Now, if you're having a conversation with a Filipino, let's say his name is Prince Charles, and someone needs to pass between you, they'll crouch down, bow their heads, and stick their arm out. That's our way of saying excuse me without interrupting you, which is kind of weird since we don't mind interrupting your dinner with loud music. And while you're talking, if you have to refer to someone standing nearby, don't point at them with your finger. That's considered very rude. Just do what we do, which is the art of pointing with your lips. If you walk up to a stranger and ask him where the bank is, you might get a response that looks like a facial tick. But it's not. It's just Filipinos being Filipino. Now, if you ask us a series of questions like, where's the party? What should I bring? What time does it start? You might be expecting an answer like, the party is at Mike's house at 8 o'clock. Just bring a bottle of wine. But the answer you're gonna get is something like a bottle of wine. Because we only answered the last question you asked. The other questions are just ignored, like we never even heard them. This is especially noticeable when texting, and the only way to get around it is to ask us things one at a time. Don't move on to the next question until you get a satisfactory answer to the last question. If you've ever chatted with a Filipino online, you know what I'm talking about. And here's one that's confused a lot of Westerners, the way we use the word until. If you ask a Filipina if she loves you, she might say until now, which sounds like you did something wrong and she's dumping you. But what she means is she still loves you right up until the present moment. Same thing with asking a Filipina if it's still raining. She might say it's been raining until now, and you assume that the rain has stopped, while she means it's still raining. Confusing, eh? You guys also find it funny what we call certain things, but our descriptions are actually pretty logical. We tend to name things according to what they do. Like tweezers are called pullers. A cuticle tool is called a pusher. And a sharp X-Acto blade is just called a cutter. We're very practical, but it might take you a while to figure out what we're talking about. And while we're on the subject of tools, here's something that'll drive you guys crazy. If you need to call a plumber, an electrician, or maybe a guy to fix your AC, don't be surprised if he shows up with no tools and wants to borrow yours. Now, I know this sounds ridiculous, and if it happened in the West, you'd fire him before he got in the door. But in the Philippines, hiring a professional doesn't guarantee he has the tools for the job. For those of you guys who are just renting a place, you probably don't have many tools, even though you had every tool ever invented back home. So don't be surprised when the guy you called tells you he has to go buy a screwdriver to fix what's wrong and he'll have to come back with one tomorrow. And good luck trying to make appointments here. If you make an appointment with a doctor, it often just means they'll see you sometime that day. You still have to wake up early and get there as fast as you can so you can get a good number. Because in many places, it's first come, first served. And appointments can change without notice. Even scheduled flights get switched around all the time. You might get to the airport and find out your flight was moved from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or even moved to another day. For people with connecting flights, that's a real problem. But don't hold your breath for any apologies. And if you're lucky enough to actually get to where you're going, don't forget to bring a gift to the person you're going to see. It's called pasalubong, and we Filipinos take it very seriously. You're expected to bring a gift that represents the place you just came from. Although a nice box of chocolates is a great choice no matter what. Funny how it never seems to work for me though. Whenever my family visits, I never get anything except the bills from the restaurants we eat at. At least I never try to make any reservations because trying to call a business here can be a really frustrating experience. Either no one will answer, the number's been changed, or the service provider you're using is different from the one the business is using, often resulting in extra charges. That's why when you try to call the police or the fire department, they have a bunch of different phone numbers depending on which provider you use. Good luck keeping that mess straight when your kitchen's on fire. And no, there's no such thing as an emergency phone number like 911. So I strongly advise that you find out the number of your local police and fire departments and go ahead and put them in your phone. If you don't, your house will have burned down to the ground by the time you figure out which number to use. But even when you know what number to call, sometimes you're not allowed to. If you're inside a bank, some of them permit you to play with your phone, but you're not allowed to talk on it. I've never understood why, so after getting fussed at one time, I actually had the nerve to ask the guard why I couldn't make a call. And I got the typical blank stare, followed by, because that's the rule. Gee, thanks. If any of you know what the real reason is, please let me know because I can't think of a single thing. So it often seems like the businesses here don't really care about the customer, which is gonna be a big adjustment for you folks coming from a Western country, where the customer is king. You'll find out that life is cheap in the Philippines, and some of the things that go on here will shock you. If you're hit and injured by a vehicle, it's cheaper to just back over you and make sure you won't need any of those expensive hospital bills. That actually happened to a high school boyfriend of mine who was hit by a truck, which then proceeded to finish the job. I kid you not. But what happens once you die and you're buried in a public cemetery? Well, just like getting kicked out of your apartment for not paying the rent, if you stop paying the cemetery, they'll actually dig up your bones and dump you in a mass grave. How's that for customer service? But even if we don't care much about your bones, do we care about your nose? There's a popular fruit called the durian that's very common here and used as an ingredient in a lot of different dishes, including candies, ice cream, and desserts. The problem is, if it's overripe or if you cut into it, durian is also one of the stinkiest substances known to man. Some people describe the smell as sewage and vomit dumped into a dirty gym sock. I heard it's almost as bad as Norwegian surströmming, that rancid sea herring stuff, so you know it's gotta be bad. So bad that Singapore, Japan, Thailand, and Hong Kong have actually banned durian on public transport, as well as in many hotels, malls, and even airports. You might have noticed that the Philippines wasn't on the list, and that's because we didn't ban it. So if you're ever on a bus and you smell something that makes you want to puke, now you know what it is. Just stand up and say, okay, who cut the durian? Well, that's it for today's exploration into Filipino culture. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back on Friday with something new. Now, I know that today is election day in the US, so I don't imagine that many of you will even see this video. But no matter who you're voting for, I hope you actually get out there and cast your ballot, because democracy is a terrible thing to waste. Till next time, folks.
Approaching Omicron standard orbit, Mr. Painter. Yes, sir.
Planet Omicron, Captain. Code 710.
Code 710 means under no circumstances are we to approach that planet. No circumstances whatsoever.
Omicron is home to a species of long-haired, tan-skinned, supposedly irresistible females called Filipinas.
Paradise. We're going in.
Captain, it might be prudent to first consult the video archives of the Filipina P to study their culture, their mating habits, and their propensity to separate men from their resources. Captain? Problems, Captain? Your visit lasted only 3.8 seconds.
A planet of traitors. Disloyal to the core. Rotten like the rest of you subhuman race.
You were conned. I did warn you, Jim. Now promise me you'll never fall for another what? Very wise, Captain. Preparing to leave orbit.
I can leave!
Captain's log, supplemental. The captain has inexplicably returned to the planet's surface. His final transmission was a hysterical, almost incoherent plea for millions of something called pesos. If you think about it, I'm nothing like Cleopatra. I never ruled a nation, I never married my brother, and I certainly don't live in denial. In fact, about the only thing we have in common is an appreciation of slightly older men. You could consider me a diplomat though, because my videos attempt to bridge the gap between the sexes and between Eastern and Western culture. I'll always bring you something new to consider, and I hope you enjoy my efforts. If you do, please remember to give a thumbs up on this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you can see my future content. And if you really want to make the Queen happy, check out my Patreon page for extra content and exclusive features. But if you don't like my videos, then you can kiss my ass.